On the green fence.
Hi, it's Neil here, and you're listening to On the Green Fence, and this is part 2 of our mini-series on artificial intelligence. Last time, we heard all about the potential of AI to help us tackle some major environmental challenges, from preventing deforestation to weather forecasting to cutting emissions in carbon-intensive industries. And because artificial intelligence can be deployed in many different ways to help us make sense of data, create products, reach decisions and make supply chains more efficient, many businesses have embraced it. It's a rapidly growing sector. The global AI market is currently valued at $142.3 billion and is expected to grow to nearly $2 trillion by 2030. And this growth is relevant because, well, some types of artificial intelligence also use a lot of energy, and maybe that's easy to forget. When we ask an online translator to translate a sentence for us, or type in a destination on Google Maps, or scroll through social media feeds, these are simple actions that take us seconds. But what we see on the screen, the information we get, is the result of an AI processing colossal amounts of data. And that can require a huge amount of energy. AI is playing a bigger role in our lives and economies, and it could also be helping to push our carbon emissions upwards, at a time when we're supposed to be making drastic cuts. According to one study, training a single AI language model so that it can perform the tasks it's supposed to can emit 5 times as much CO2 as a car over its lifetime.
We have to stop not considering the climate crisis as the major crisis that this world is facing at the moment. And we have to put it first. And in order to put it first, we need to move beyond this absolutely mythical understanding of technologies.
There is this idea of AI being this clean technology just being produced by a handful of companies, but it actually relies on the exploitation of people and the environment.
AI is being used in negative environmental ways. One report estimates that the oil and gas industry is expected to make $500 billion in additional profit by 2025 thanks to AI and advanced analytics. $500 billion.
In this episode, we're going to be looking at how AI could harm rather than help the planet, and the carbon footprint of the technology itself. What does green AI look like? And how do we shape these technologies to make them work in a sustainable way for our societies?
We know too well, and especially the audience of this podcast, that if we want to meet the Paris Agreement target of keeping the global warming below 1.5 and the famous threshold, we need to cut emissions globally by 50%, and we don't even have a decade to do that.
That's Benedetta Brevini, Associate Professor of Political Economy of Communication at the University of Sydney and Senior Fellow at the London School of Economics. She's also the author of the book, Is AI Good for the Planet? We were keen to get her on the podcast because she's been closely following the rise of AI and the history of technological development. And she says she's wary of what she calls mythical thinking surrounding artificial intelligence, specifically the idea that AI can rescue us from the problems facing our society, not least climate change.
We tend to think of this artificial deity, of this artificial sublime hand that will have the ability to even surpass our cognitive functions as human, right? And if we start defining AI as technologies, machines, and infrastructures, we're moving away from this mythical, sublime phase of AI, right? We're moving away from this idea that it's something that transcends reality, right? It's something bigger than us. These mythical ideas that impede us from actually really thinking about the materiality of AI. The moment in which we understand these communication technologies as in their materialities, as technologies, machines, and infrastructures, it is at that point that we realize also that they use scarce resources. in their production, in their consumption, in their disposal. And this is where, of course, they exacerbate the problems of waste and pollution, and they exacerbate the climate crisis. Whenever we're developing a technology like this, we never start breaking down the life cycle and production chain of AI. And this is where I wanted to bring back this conversation. We need to, if we consider AI as technologies, machines, and infrastructure, it means that we need to consider the entire production chain and all the environmental problems that are connected to this environmental chain, and most notably energy consumption and emissions, but also material toxicity and also electronic waste.
Okay, let's have a closer look at what makes up the carbon footprint of artificial intelligence. Creating, training, and then operating AI models requires computing power, and that means energy. Training is the process of teaching the AI to interpret mountains of data and learn from it to complete a task accurately or make a decision based on that data, for instance. It can be tricky to put numbers on this because the amount of data AI uses depends on the kind of algorithm, the machine learning model, and, for example, whether those data centers storing the data AI churns through are powered by fossil fuels or renewables. Small AI models can run on a simple laptop, while big language models that use deep learning, like the one behind ChatGPT, need a significant amount of computing power. And then there are the emissions that come from manufacturing the computing equipment, the hardware that gets upgraded and replaced, and the waste that results when it's thrown away. So there are a few things that need to be factored in here. Okay, back to Benedetta Brevini.
When we consider a very basic training, natural language processing model, okay, of AI, so something simple, think of Google Translate, okay? So just the training of this model to make sure that this model can work and can translate for us will entail, and these are data that have been published since 2019 by Strubel, Ganesh, and McCallum, who are based at Massachusetts Amherst. So this model, so just one model of AI, just for the training of this model, we need something like 284,000 kilograms of carbon emission. Now, the first time I've read this data, I was really shocked, but at the same time, I needed to make sense of them. And so I tried to compare. If you jump on a plane from London to New York, your carbon emission would be 986 kilograms. But to train one AI algorithm, we emit 284,000 kilograms.
And that's just training it. That's not even using it, right? That's just training it.
The training of it. So shouldn't we have a conversation? How many times did you hear that you should reduce your travels? How many times? Always, right? And that would be the best way. So why we're never hearing and we're never having a conversation about how do we reduce this carbon footprint of this training, for example, of an algorithm? And there are ways to do it, and we're working on it at this very moment. But at the moment, I think that what is crucial is to change the discourse and to finally acknowledge that if we don't place the climate crisis at the center of this development of this most recent technology, which is AI, then we're going to absolutely miss the chance to sort out the biggest crisis that we're facing.
It's also triggering new needs, isn't it? Every time we bring around this innovation, it's almost as if it's pushing us towards AI, because a lot of these systems that we're going to put in place, they have to be super flexible, right? Especially if they're going to be based on renewable energy. So in a way, it's almost paving the way for AI to come in, because otherwise we won't be able to deal with this without AI, will we? That's part of the problem, isn't it?
Absolutely. And actually, we need to really ask, what are the advantages for us? Because we know that there are advantages for the corporations that are developing them. And this is where a study of political economy becomes crucial, because we need to understand who are the corporations that are currently controlling the development of AI. We know in Europe especially, we've been trying really hard, right, to have a conversation around AI. But the problem is that the stakeholders that are taking mostly of the decision around the development of AI come from the industry. And the problem really is that we see at the level of efficiency, the kind of economy of scale that they can achieve in a corporation by implementing AI. But this type of efficiency are really leading to well-being, are really leading to something, again, in the public interest, considering also the climate crisis. Like all these new applications that we're developing, are heavily reliant on AI. And it is the structure of data capitalism that is leading to the necessity for more AI, because it's a cycle, right? We need more data. We need to collect more data in order to be able to feed also the machine. But we also need more data in order to push the cycles of this production chain. So in a way, it seems almost impossible to stop.
Benedetta says she's currently collaborating with engineers to look at the entire life cycle of AI and come up with recommendations to reduce the carbon footprint of data scientists' practices. That also means putting sustainability and climate concerns on the agenda right at the start, in the design and algorithm training phase. Let's bring in Mollen here. She's a research associate at the NGO Algorithm Watch, which is based here in Germany, in Berlin. And she's also calling for there to be more public discussion around when AI is necessary and what using it means for the environment.
There is this idea of AI being this clean technology just being produced by a handful of companies, but it actually relies on the exploitation of people and the environment, basically. With ChatGPT, we see that there's been a lot of work on moderating and cleaning the data being outsourced to Kenyan sweatshops, where people are working under very precarious conditions, just cleaning up the data set from the worst that we see on the internet, because otherwise the chatbot would have been so much more toxic than it is. The training of one large language model is just a fraction of its entire emissions. So the development happens only one time. The training happens a bit more often, depends on the model. Sometimes it happens daily, but it doesn't have to. And the inference, so the application phase, that happens billions of times potentially. There we only have very small numbers concerning the emissions. We have low emissions. But with it happening billions of times potentially, the emissions still are significant. And we have estimates that actually, if you look at the entire AI life cycle, the application phase accounts for 90% of the CO2 emissions. So if we see already in the training phase, for instance, that emissions can be up to 270 tons, seeing that the application phase might be much higher, we really have to come to a discussion of how much CO2 these big AI large language models emit. We know that the entire data center infrastructure and data submission networks, they account to 2 to 4% of the entire global CO2 emissions. This is not only AI, but AI is a large part of that. So we really have to understand where this huge energy consumption comes from and how to reduce it, because 2 to 4% is almost as much as the aviation industry produces. So we have to come to a discussion here.
And what happens if the companies that are pushing this, all these tech companies, what if they sort of say, well, the problem, we'll solve it by just, basing the entire AI systems on renewables. We're going to do this with renewables to 100%. Does that solve the problem then? Can we then?
No, it doesn't solve the problem, because actually one has to admit that big tech is quite good with renewable energy. So big tech has the power to build their own data centers, and they are largely powered by renewable energies, or they really make an effort to have them powered by renewable energies. But on the one hand, this brings another problem, because Google, for instance, they like to go to very dry, hot, and windy areas where they can rely on wind and solar energy. But at the same time, these areas are usually quite dry. But these data centers, they need a lot of water to cool those servers, for instance. So we know from examples in Chile, for example, that the renewable energy supply of Google's data center in Santiago de Chile is very good. But at the same time, local communities are actually revolting against the data center and against the construction of new data centers because of their huge water needs. And also coming back to your question, just relying on renewable energies will not be enough because we don't have enough renewable energy.
There are efforts underway to make AI a greener industry. Tech giants are keen to point out what they are doing to reduce their impact on the planet. For example, Google aims to be operating exclusively on carbon-free energy by 2030. Microsoft has pledged to be carbon negative by 2030, and Amazon plans to reach net zero by 2040. To reduce emissions, companies might choose to operate or use data centers in regions that rely on renewable energy. Running these huge server farms in parts of the US or Australia, where fossil fuels still make up a significant chunk of the power grid, will produce more emissions than in, say, Iceland, where geothermal power is a main source of energy, or France, where nuclear energy could be used to power computers. Anna says open-source AI models could also be helpful from a sustainability perspective, because that means they can be reused and altered, and don't need to be developed and trained from scratch. She also questions the trend of building bigger and bigger models, which might make results more accurate, but can be much more energy-intensive.
There's a very unreflected development happening when it comes to AI systems. They're just built bigger and bigger, and there's just massive amounts of data just thrown at them without considering that there could be smaller data sets, more qualitative data sets, which could also serve the purpose that these companies try to achieve. Still, the main mantra of big tech and also the machine learning research community is to build bigger and bigger models right now.
But even if companies and developers work to shrink AI's emissions, there's another way this technology could hamper efforts to fight climate change.
And we're in danger of building essentially like certified fair trade landmines, where in you making the algorithm is very green, but what the algorithm is being used to do is not very green.
We heard from David Rolnick in the last episode. He's an assistant professor in the School of Computer Science at McGill University in Canada and at the Mila AI Institute. He's also a co-founder of the non-profit organization Climate Change AI.
I'm concerned with the ways that AI is being used. Really, many of the innovations in AI are being directed at advertising systems, which have an impact by deliberately shaping consumer behavior and being designed to increase consumption, which assuredly comes with a very significant climate cost. It may be difficult to quantify, but I expect that it is truly enormous. Various stakeholders, including the tech industry, want people to focus on the energy usage of AI instead of also thinking about, for example, the ways that AI is being used extensively by the fossil fuel industry, in automated advertising systems, which are designed to make people purchase more, the ways that self-driving cars are probably going to make climate change worse, and various other ways that AI is being used in negative environmental ways, which are extremely significant.
Let's look at a few more examples. AI can make it easier to manage livestock at scale, which could lead to an increase in cattle farming. Or, as David mentioned, the case of self-driving vehicles, which are more fuel efficient, but could lead to more people in personal cars rather than on public transport. And AI can help bring down the cost of extracting the fossil fuels, oil and gas.
One report estimates that the oil and gas industry is expected to make $500 billion in additional profit by 2025. thanks to AI and advanced analytics. $500 billion.
The environment NGO Greenpeace has been highly critical of AI contracts between fossil fuel companies and Amazon, Microsoft and Google. In a report from 2020, it said companies such as Shell, BP and ExxonMobil were using AI tools to expand their oil and gas operations, reduce costs and in some cases boost production. It said tech companies provided their clients with cloud storage for large amounts of data, as well as sophisticated tools for analyzing, modeling and understanding those vast data sets. For example, machine learning models that can make it easier to map and assess underground deposits of oil and gas. Shiying Wu is a campaigner with Greenpeace Asia, based in Beijing, and she says these contracts undermine the ambitious climate goals set by tech companies.
It is deeply concerning to see all these tech giants, AI technologies are aiding oil and gas companies. So we think tech companies like Google and Microsoft, they have boosted extensively about their climate goals, such as they have committed to powering their own operations with 100% renewable energies. But when these tech companies collaborate with oil and gas companies, it works directly against these tech companies' climate goals. We do think tech giants in general must refuse to collaborate with oil and gas companies in any form to stop this industry from growing. And it's more like generating a pile of trash from your own business, but dumping it in someone else's front yard.
I mean, if we're talking about energy, how do we weigh up the value of deploying these technologies? For instance, to improve efficiency and reduce emissions in some industries, that's one of the pro arguments. Balancing that against the carbon footprint that they have. When is it worth it? Or at what point is the cost too high?
I do think it is a very good sign that there are companies are willing to develop technologies to help our society to reduce emissions. But, some companies are using this as a PR stunt to lead the public to believe that they have done enough in carbon reductions. For example, companies like Microsoft, Google, and Samsung, they might say they have invested in new software or technologies to reduce carbon emissions across their operations or supply chains. But the reality is that they have kept delaying using the most effective options to reduce these emissions. As we go into 2023 now, partnering with oil and gas sector in any way should not be accepted. And also, the impact of the climate crisis are already too severe to be ignored by us.
Google has since said it will no longer build customized AI tools for helping companies extract fossil fuels. Artificial intelligence already has a place in homes, workplaces, city transport networks, social media and businesses. Just about every industry is using it in some way. And with the sector growing rapidly, that role is only likely to become more significant in the future. We've looked at how this technology can help us improve efficiency and rein in emissions, and how it can also make our climate targets harder to reach if it's used to expand carbon-heavy activities. So where does that leave us? What can we do to avoid the possible pitfalls? Billionaire Elon Musk has raised concerns more than once about what he sees as the potential risks. He's even called AI dangerous technology that should be regulated by some sort of authority to make sure it's operating within the public interest. The experts we spoke to for this podcast all said regulation will be key to manage how AI develops in the future. Here's David Rolnick.
Technologies don't just have effects independent of our choices. The way in which technology impacts society is changeable. So, for example, for self-driving technology, self-driving cars, personal vehicles are expected to make climate change worse. But if autonomous vehicle technology is used in public transportation, that can have a positive impact on climate change. The implicit choices which are being made by technologists, by regulators, by members of the public, shape how technologies get used. and the way in which the media portrays new technologies, prioritizes discussion of them, even by discussing certain technologies in a negative light, that can make them more visible sometimes. I think that what gets discussed and the way in which technology is portrayed, if it's portrayed as something that is an inevitability rather than something that we are all choosing in certain ways. Yeah, and the particular kinds of applications that are discussed and the kinds of use cases and needs for AI.
There are two things I'm taking away from that. The one where you say that technology is not inevitable, this progress. We still have a choice how it evolves, how we develop it, what we use it for. And also, if I understood correctly, that perhaps at the beginning of every decision that we have a mindset that factors in the climate crisis.
Yes, absolutely. The normal way for developing a new technology, at least within AI, is to see what's possible and see what's called for by short-term market incentives and what's cool and attracts investment, and then do it. And then society plays catch up. Regulators play catch up. Regulators think about technologies that are 10 years out of date and don't address the challenges of the technologies now or the technologies 5 years in the future. They're foreseeable and generally don't think of themselves as shaping the pathways down which technology could go in the way you might have a switch on a railroad. We could go this way, we could go this way. They're both good. They're probably both good for the economy. It's not that one way is the way to technophobia and shutting down innovation. It's really a question of what we're prioritizing, and getting in early and shaping those choices that are being made is really important.
Here in the European Union, lawmakers have proposed a landmark bill to govern the use of artificial intelligence. The legislation aims to classify AI tools according to perceived risk, and it covers anyone who provides a product or service that uses AI. AIs considered unacceptable would be banned outright, while those deemed high risk would face heightened scrutiny. The AI Act could be passed this year, something Anne Mollen from Algorithm Watch is following closely.
It's quite hard to work against the narrative of competition in the AI economy between the US on the one side and China on the other side, and Europe being kind of far behind. So environmental impact, or accounting for environmental impacts and trying to regulate environmental impacts, is being seen as hindrance to the economic potential of the AI industry. But I don't think that we have a choice here, because we don't have the data center infrastructure to just build AI systems bigger and bigger. So I think it will be an asset to build more sustainable AI systems, and it will become a necessity in the coming years. And we see kind of big tech also being more transparent about the environmental impact. So I think it's a development that is just going to take place.
Governments around the world are still working out how to deal with AI, how to encourage innovation while avoiding potential risks, upholding ethical standards and protecting citizens. But keeping up to speed with such rapidly developing technology will be a challenge. And if AI continues to evolve at this pace, what can we expect further down the line? Where are we headed? Today's AI tools are very good at performing specific tasks. But will we eventually have artificial intelligence that is smarter than humans, capable of thinking and learning independently? That's straying into the realm of science fiction, but that's what we'll be focusing on next week in part 3 of our mini-series on AI. We'll be talking to a philosopher about what rapid AI development could mean for us as a species and the world we live in. It's bound to be an interesting discussion, so do join us for that. That's it from me for now. Many thanks to my colleague and producer Natalie Muller and my sound engineer Thomas Schmidt. And a big thank you to all our listeners for sharing, reviewing and subscribing to On the Green Fence. My name is Neil King. Take it easy and take care.
On the Green Fence.